Hello, hello, and welcome to my thought on Tuesday, a sort of overcast, sort of comfy, walking kind of Tuesday. It was really lovely. Um, but I was thinking of some of the advantages of the lockdown, and one of the advantages is that I've gotten an awful lot of reading done. I was I carry books with me wherever I go, and with the lockdown, I didn't go anywhere. So I got to read some of the hardcovers that I've been thinking, nah, it's too heavy to stick in the backpack with everything else. And I've been reading some really wonderful books. So I was thinking about how I learned to read. And I learned to read at a very early age. And the reason I learned to read is because my mother believed that every child should have a bowel movement every morning. For some reason, she thought that the body was like a machine, and when you got up in the morning, that's what you did, you dumped. So she would put me on the can with a book, and the book was My Book House for Children. And the book would be something that she had read to me the night before. And she would leave me there until I produced something. And I'm a very stubborn little girl, and I didn't always react immediately. Many times I was there for a couple hours, and with this book that had been read to me the night before, and that is how I learned to read. And I have loved books ever since. Ever since they have been my escape from my mother, and from life. Books. And I have often said that the reason that I wrote 11 novels is so that I would never run out of reading material. I would always have a book to read. But what I remember most about books is when I was young, I think you could take as many books as you wanted out of the library, that you could take an awfully large number of books out of the library. And I went to Kent Library, which was about, I would say it was a good 2.5 miles from my house. But my mother would let me walk there, mainly because I think my mother always hoped a car would hit me and then she'd be done with me. But whatever the reason, she would let me walk there. She very rarely let me do anything. Uh, but I was allowed to walk to Kent Library. I was also allowed to walk to my piano lesson, which was another 2.5 miles in the other direction. But so I would every Monday, I would walk to the library, and I would at Kent Library, and I would take out. I think I'm contradicting myself, but I think that there was a limit of something like 10. There was a lot of books that you could take, and I would go into the children's section, um, and I would get 8 or 10 books. And I was a very little girl. And I would carry these books. You couldn't even see me. I would carry them home. We didn't have book bags. I would carry them all piled together, being really careful that they wouldn't fall. And then I would come home, and I would put them in my room, and then I would take one book at a time, and my mother always wanted me to go outside and play. And if you've been following these things, I'm crap at outdoor play. I used to fall. We would do hopscotch, and I would end up on my head. We would do jump rope, and I couldn't do it. And I would always fall, and I would always trip, and then try not to cry because I didn't want them to see that they were tearing my heart out. Uh, I couldn't catch a ball. I just lousy at outdoor play, and I also I'm very social. Ever since I was little, I was very social. Loved talking to people, loved being with people, but not that kind of play. Uh, no, not play. I didn't play dolls with anyone, so I had the books, and I would take one book, and I did not like home. My sister was always screaming, my mother was always yelling, my father was never there, and the only time I did not like home. I escaped it very often to go to my cousin Jessica's, to my Aunt Tig's, but I didn't like home. So I would take the book and I would go down to the hall closet because I didn't want to go out and play. And if my mother saw me, she would make me go outside. And I would just stand there. I never would do anything. I didn't like outside. So I would take the book and I would go in the closet. And my mother had a seal coat, And I don't believe in fur coats, but then I had no idealistic things about it. I didn't realize what it was. I don't think I ever associated it with a real animal. And a seal is the softest fur. Oh God, it's so soft. And I would sit there in the floor of the closet with my face against the seal coat, and I would read. And I would read one book after another. I could finish a book in a day. And as long as she didn't know I was there, she didn't make me go outside, and I could do that. And then on Monday, I would take the 8 or 10 books that I had, and I would take it back and get 8 or 10 more. By the time I was 12, um, I had used up all the books in the public library, and the district library, the neighborhood library, and they gave me. I think I was 11 because they gave me a special card because I was too young to go to the main library. Um, and they gave me a special card, and I got to take a streetcar, and it cost a penny, and I would take a streetcar on Mondays, and I would go down to the main library, and Toledo Public Library. There's not much that's great about Toledo, but Toledo's public library is exquisite. It has wonderful murals of authors and famous books, and there's a tiny little girl all alone with my library card and my penny to get home. And I would go into this gigantic building, it was very high ceiling. And I remember the children's department was up the stairs. It was on a mezzanine. And I would go there, and then I would read. I was not that literary. I read everything, but I would read Janet Lambert books, and Cherry Ames books. And I would go there, and oh my God, it was so exciting. And then I would come home. And I remember also my puzzlement when I realized in school that the other children couldn't read because I've been able to read since I was 2 because I was sitting on the can. I remember that so now uh, uh, before the lockdown, there was at least in America, there was a decline in people reading books. I am not good, I think probably because there's no seal coat, I'm not good at reading on Kindle. I like a book. I like to hold on to the book and read it. But before the lockdown, there was a decrease in people's reading, and I know for me, I was really very busy. The only reading that I ever did was when I went on the tube or in a bus or in a plane. But now I've been able to read, and I have been reading wonderful books. And so I'm just talking about how some of the good things that come from the lockdown, I think, is being able to be able to recapture the magic of reading. And thank you so much for joining me on this sort of rambling thought.